Welcome to Intercut Explains, our review show where we discuss everything related to a new movie or TV show. I am your co host, Zachary Shevich. And joining me, I'll follow you anywhere you go. It's Arturo Zurita.
What's up, Zach? I'm excited to talk about what was my most anticipated video game at the time. Back in the year of our Lord 2013, it was one of my favorites of all time. Possibly the show that has finally put to rest that video game adaptations don't have to suck.
Yeah, do we have to have that discussion anymore? Because it's not the first good
It's not even the
adaptation of a
first.
video game to a movie or TV show. It might be the best, and it might be the best adaptation, particularly, but
It's the
like
nail
that
in the
whole
coffin for
old
that talk.
trope. Exactly. That old trope of like you can't really get a good movie or TV show off of a video game adaptation, I think is pretty well and dead.
Good to hear.
With The Last of Us ending its 9 episode first season run on HBO as one of their most watched shows, and feel like that's only going to increase going into a very hyped for season 2. Let's take a look back on this season of television because I think it was an eventful one that we were watching week to week. I know you don't normally love to watch shows week to week, but you'll make
Says
an
something, yeah.
exception for something like The Last of Us. So let's start with a two-part question. Was season 1 of The Last of Us better than the first Last of Us video game to you? And also, does it have to be worth watching?
No, it was not better than the video game. This is I've told you we're now in this new era where the annoying people who are always feel like, oh, the book was better than the movie. I'm gonna tell you right now, the video game fans are now gonna be in that pocket talking about, no, the video game was way better than the film. And you know what? I hate to be one of those because it was. There's just something about the video game, especially with replaying the remastered version, where you really get to become these characters. It's this next level of a medium where you do have that narrative essence to it while also being a part of it, while also feeling like you're going through the actions of these characters. Uh, Again, two completely different forms to look at the story. I think both of them really do the story justice, which is the most important part. But my preferred way would always be to watch or to play the video game if you can.
Yeah, I mean, they're different flavors, right? And like there's certain
Sure.
things that a TV show can't do that video game can, and vice versa. I think there are things that they do accomplish on the TV show that wouldn't feel right or wouldn't be of a part of the video game world. But there are like certain things that I think maybe feel like they're missing when you hold one up against the other. You know, one thing I think most people have talked about is because, 9 episodes, even for a TV show, is kind of a truncated season. And I think there's an element of that you feel in that because in the video game world, by virtue of them being avatars for your play, you spend a lot of time just sort of like hanging out with Ellie and
Mm-hmm.
Joel, sort of just being in their world, hearing little banter that isn't consequential enough to make it into a TV show where they have to cut for the best hour, but you know, you have to fill the 100 or so hours that it takes for you to beat The Last of Us with more stuff that lets you know the characters better, even if it is like little side stories that you pick up along the way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's I don't think a TV show limited to 9 or so hours is ever going to have the depth that you get from a video game that is as dedicated to world building as The Last of Us was. But to answer my own question, does that mean it's not worth not watching? I don't think so at all, because the story that they've told in both of these mediums is one that is really well done. It is really emotional, like gets you very invested in a way that then is used almost combatively against you by its end. I think it's just an interesting story, and even though I think a lot of there's been a lot of other things that do this kind of like zombie world, bleak humanity is the greatest enemy thing. It's not necessarily like the most novel terrain. I think it's done with an elegance and with a standard of execution that's a lot higher than most of its like similar the similar entities out there, right?
I agree.
Is there anything that you can identify that the show is doing better than the games, even if though you like the games maybe a bit more?
Yeah, you were mentioning the fact that you have like the avatar that's in the way. If you remove what would have been the graphics from 2016, even the remastered ones, which are great, there you cannot beat a true performance. Like that's the whole
Hmm.
point of Avatar, really pushing for it not being motion capture but performance capture. The idea that you can almost not even tell the difference between the emotions on their face. You're not
Hmm.
going to beat a close up on Bella Ramsey mid season when you really see the character of Ellie grow up. The tears that Pascal sheds are going to be, just a little bit more real, and you're able to get those close ups that don't feel like you're watching an animation. Which, again, I still think that the way that they were able to make the video game really puts you in their shoes.
Right.
But performance wise, I think they did a fantastic job embodying the characters. And I was one where
Yeah.
I was a little rough with them at the beginning. I wasn't sure if they were really embodying them. And then midway through that episode 4 to 5, I was all in. And I think
Was
that's where
there a
the show's
moment
able to take you.
Was there a moment in particular? I did want to ask you about that because, at least for me, I was pretty in on Pedro Pascal as Joel from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something about the gruff quality to his voice, the weary, worn way he carried himself, where I just didn't. Maybe it's because I'm used to seeing Pedro Pascal in these brighter roles, in these more comedic turns, at least of recent, but it just immediately felt like he was the Joel that I remembered. Whereas with Bella, it took me a little bit longer, just maybe because there are some differences there, but it took me a little bit longer to drive into the character. And then once we got a little bit more season, a little bit more into the like fraught nature and like life or death consequences part of the show, I was really, really in on her performance. Was there a moment for
Yeah.
you that converted you to either of their performances?
Full spoilers?
Yeah, we're going full spoilers here, Intercut Explain style.
Perfect. Yeah, I was pretty in on Pedro early on because it's Pedro with a sidekick who's a lot younger, traveling because they have the special abilities and they need to get somewhere.
Yeah.
He kills that aspect of it. But now you actually get to see his face. That moment that you're showing up on screen in the video game, that happens, and you are playing the rest of that video game trying to make up for that moment in his life. You feel that immediately in this one. I think just the way that it's written and directed in both mediums, when he loses his daughter, I think you're set. You're in on it. For Ellie, when it came to the performance early on, you were talking about how you've seen him in comedic roles. I've seen her in nothing but an accent that is her original, British version of speaking. So early on, I'm not
Right.
gonna lie, it's not a matter of like, oh, I got used to it later. No, I actually do think she gets better once the story goes full gear. Early on, you hear a lot of that American slang that's also supposed to be this American girl in the apocalypse. Um, but you're seeing a lot of like the inflections in her voice kind of be this post-apocalyptic teen that I wasn't buying at first. But
Right.
then it's specifically the one where they end up with the brother, the two siblings, and an incident happens where the kid turns, and she still
Yeah.
has this nature to her where she thinks that everything isn't as gloomy as it was. Um, and after that incident happens, she feels guilt, and I think it's that emotion of guilt in her character arc that really pushed her forward. Because from there, the
Hmm.
responsibility she has of taking care of Joel, the way that she directs herself when meeting other strangers, it shifts into the next gear. So, uh, I just think the writing in the second half was stronger for her.
Yeah, I mean, it brought her from sort of sidekick, wisecracking character
Yeah,
into more of a fully fleshed out three-dimensional person, right? Like
could she
they
killed it?
stopped having Joel just sort of like shielding her from the world and had her actually experiencing things and having to go through ups and downs of her own. And that episode 5, like you mentioned, is really like a moment where the I don't know, thin line between your life and death is
Mm-hmm.
perhaps best exemplified. And she is has to really feel the weight of losing somebody. That's a thing that they, a thing that they discuss more in the show, I think,
Yeah.
than in the games, is that like she doesn't quite know as much what it's like to lose people until she goes through the events of this season. And I
It's
think
also
Bella did a really great job of that. That for me, their performances are something that I prefer getting from the show. I think there's a depth to those performances
really.
that you don't necessarily get in the video games. Yeah.
Ooh, I don't know. I can't downplay him like that. I think you still get it in the video game, but there's something about a close up to a live action actor.
Yeah.
To go back on her being, like the whippersnapper who's doing all of these lines.
Right.
I didn't find her as funny in the first season, but that doesn't mean that her as an actress isn't funny. There's that Prime movie that
Yeah.
we both liked, the Birdie one.
Catherine
She
called
is
Birdie.
really, yeah, she's
She's
really
great in
funny
that.
when it's written perfectly well. It's just I think she really relished in the dramatic stuff here. In that fifth episode, it's also the moment where it contrasts where we're leading to. This idea of, do you sacrifice her to save everybody else? And in
Mhm.
that scene, towards the end, she truly thinks that her blood can save somebody else just because they've been bitten. And it's her realizing like she does not possess that power. Or
Yeah.
does she? She just never got to know that. So I really love that parallel midway through. So there's a lot that was working on in that fifth episode, which, spoiler alert, one of my favorites, easily. And I think
Yeah.
one of the moments of the series where it trumps the video game for sure.
Absolutely. Uh, sticking with the comparison to the video game, then let's hone in on some of those things that maybe the show didn't do quite as well, in our opinion, at least, as
Clickers,
they did in the video game. Clickers in general.
where they at? We got it.
Let
We
me.
got to go tomorrow. We did not get enough. I'm on that camp.
There we go.
That's enough.
Yeah, I mean, they again, it's because they're doing the whole thing of emphasizing that, like, humanity is the real great threat. Like, they really
Okay.
sideline the clickers, and there's uh entire episodes where we don't see them at all. And, like, sure, they
And it's
do
still
a
good.
bit of that in the games as well, but not nearly as much of it.
Yeah.
It also kind of, I don't know, I feel like there were fewer moments where the clickers played an integral role in the plot, right? Like, it's more just like plot mechanism to get them from point A to point B, and
Mm-hmm.
not as many moments where it's like, uh episode 7, where it's her and Riley, and that just sort of like upends their moment. Like, I almost wish there was maybe a little bit more focus on the interruptions in life, where, like, you could argue that the biggest role that clickers played in some of these episodes were, like, in episode 3, it just meant that they're isolated the whole time and don't see anybody, right? Like, the role is
Yeah.
that they're making people not interact with other people, not that they're encountering clickers.
Yeah, on top of that, they add an extra element to the TV series that wasn't in the video game about how they're all kind of connected through the ground, especially when it comes to roots. And it's
Yeah.
like, that actually means that there should be even more so. Because at this point, it's not a sound thing that goes off that can attract all of them. There's almost like this uh, avatar tree connection that they all have with each other.
Right.
I think, and you're showcasing it right there, there's so much detail to them that they did not go the Walking Dead route where they're just going to put a bunch of extras and really great makeup, depending on what season you're watching, and then you have a horde of them going out. It's like they specifically wanted them to accentuate a part of the story where you're getting close-ups of them. They're very detailed, and when they appear, don't get me
Mm-hmm.
wrong, the sound mixing is fantastic. You have them walking around, and you get one close-up of them, and you see every single detail, and it felt like they weren't going to go cheap, so you're just not going to see them. And I don't
Right.
know.
So they're
I
just
think
going
we
to
should
use
see
them
more.
sparingly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's the world that we're in.
Yeah. It also, I like the places in which they try to homage the game, but there is a little bit of, like, all right, that
What?
we're at the boss now when this guy comes out. And, like, I don't, I think sometimes the clicker stuff was almost a little bit too reminiscent of the game, and they didn't do enough, like, new things with them. I liked that they added that element that you mentioned of them being interconnected. And I don't know, it, it's just interesting to see the zombies that are kind of the inciting incident be sidelined
Right.
so much. Um, you know, yeah. Something else that I'm missing in the show, I guess time is the thing that we talked about ultimately. Um, oh, question: did HBO just make the most expensive video game ad in history then with this show? Because if we're talking about, like, the better experience is the video game, did they just get millions and millions of viewers to want to go buy that video game now.
If they did, that's fantastic. I wouldn't call it an ad. That'd be below. I don't want to say that Pedro was in a trailer for something else, a commercial. But I will say that it's, you know how like when a Disney movie comes out and then they do the novel adaptation about the movie that you just saw, so you can go to the store and buy like the Lego movie as a novelization. You can buy the Star Wars as a
Right.
novelization. Movies have become the new novelization. Oh, you don't have the 60 hours to play the game? Here's the show. A little bit shortened, right?
The
And
Last
I
of
mean
Us
that in
all
a nice way.
cutscenes.
Yeah, it's all the cutscenes like come together, and I say that in a very nice way. I don't think it's a bad thing. We love the
Yeah.
show. I want to make sure people get that. We love the show,
Yeah.
but it does feel almost like it's cutting it
Well,
down in order to be able to be the most mainstream
does
version
that
of it.
bother you at all? Though there are
No,
points
because I understand
early
the mediums.
on. Well, but there are points early on in the series where I did kind of feel like, is there enough new here? Right? Like, am I better off just replaying the game with this time, or watching cutscenes? And then I think they do along the way find enough um, places to add depth, places to add character moments, bits of dialogue that deepen the relationships that made it worthwhile to me. But I do feel, at least in that first half of the season, a little bit of like, well, this is sort of just like a different version of the same flavor.
Maybe, but I don't mind watching a movie and then seeing the Broadway adaptation, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind when something gets adapted to be a mini series
Yeah.
while they still had a longer version. I like director's cut. Like, so to me, I just think it's showcasing a story that has been with us for a decade and
Yeah.
keeping it in the discussion, not just by having sequels to the video game, but having an adaptation for the screen. Make a movie in the future if you wanted to. I think it allows it to stay alive and to have a different perspective to it. The worst part is when they're bad. No one wants to see a bad remake, a bad adaptation
Right.
of something. But this is not bad. It's not even good. It's great. So for that, like you said, I just think it's a different flavor to how you approach the story.
We have a live stream comment from Hillary saying, "I wish they had kept the intro sequences from episodes 1 and 2 going throughout," which is
100% agree.
that's a
Easily.
great place to transition to my next point. In talking about our top 3 episodes from this year's season, I don't know if you have your top 3 ready, but my number 3 is episode 2, Infected, because when that show opened in Jakarta, I felt the world opening up in a way that would have felt very like inorganic in the game. It would have felt forced in a medium where you are kind of meant to be following your protagonist character. But it works so well on television to build the world, to let you see aspects of people's lives that don't necessarily brush up against the main character. And I agree, like, I really wish that they kind of went into built that world up more, showed us more sides of it, showed us maybe different things going on in the United States or something like that too. I That's something that I maybe missed as they went along,
Hmm.
but was one of the most exciting parts of the series to me, and something that was something that the show did better than the games.
Agreed. And that felt like you said,
Yeah.
where that can't really be a cutscene as much as it is a narrative choice, a narrative
Yeah.
intro for a series. They should have continued that because it was also really cool to see actors that aren't going to appear ever again. They like hired
I
really good
Yeah.
talent to do a bit. They weren't afraid, like you said, to do it in other countries. I don't know. That would have been something cool to see, but I understand that they had to like bring it back, and you only have 9 episodes, which, on HBO standards, 9, go the full 10. 10
Right.
bill. Just go all out with it. Personally, I do like the episodes you mentioned. I think my favorite it has to be episode 5. I think it's some of the best performances. It's the one moment where they adapt what happened into the video game and do it better in the show. I want to make sure
Yeah.
I get the actor right. The one who plays the older brother. The cut to his face. I think it was the character of Henry Lamar Johnson.
Yeah.
Shout out to you, sir. We, like I said, Alina's been playing the remastered version, so we were always like
Hmm.
play the 2 hours of the episode first and then watch it 2 hours. This was one where we did it in reverse. And maybe it was because we saw the episode before she played the game, but I'm telling you, there is the episode 4 one right before they meet where Ellie does her
Hmm.
first kill. Nah, it's better than the video game. You see it, you
Yeah.
feel it. It's like, oh man, she just lost her innocence. And you don't fully get that in episode 4. But in episode 5, there is a cut, and it's just the way it's directed when the little brother has to be taken out. the performance there of the brother just
Yeah.
staring at him and it not cutting. It's the best episode of the series, in my opinion.
Yeah. So episode 2 was my third favorite. I had the finale actually. Episode 9 is my second favorite, but I agree. Episode 5, that is the best.
Finale.
Yeah. Brutal and to the point, you know?
Oh.
And I love the little bits of dialogue that kind of added depth to the character. That's one of the moments that they adapted directly from the video game that I thought like worked really well in the whole bit with the giraffe. So I actually enjoyed, even though it is the briefest one we got, I enjoyed that finale. But I agree with you that episode 5, Endure and Survive, is the best of the season. It has all the highs and lows that you can expect from a zombie show, and but that ending, it's just so like this feels like a weird way to describe it, but like every little action is perfect and rational, and you can kind of feel the characters processing from moment to moment how to deal with the worst situation imaginable. And you know, ultimately it is about life and death in a show like this, and to
Mm-hmm.
put you in such an uncomfortable position and have you kind of have the same series of thoughts as the character has to have in that moment is so effective, sold as you mentioned by those excellent performances. It's the highlight of the season to me. Did you have episode 3 on your favorites of the season? Because that's
Yes.
seems to have
Yes.
been most people's highlight.
I
I'm
go
not as high on
five.
it as most people.
Really? I go 5-1-3. I love.
513.
Yeah, I
The
like the
premiere.
idea of just being able to take a detour.
Mm-hmm.
Because that to me is not a filler. There's this argument that a lot of people have of what a filler episode is. I'm like, this is not a filler. This is a flex. You could take a
Mm-hmm.
whole hour and just focus on something else to really flesh out the world. I also do think that the way the episode is written, mind you, you're focusing on characters. We're in spoilers, who do die, who have nothing to do with our
Yeah.
main characters. So to a lot of people, that's why they rely on that word. Nah, the themes of what happens to those two characters allows you to understand what's happening with R2 right here. It's almost like saying that the intro wastes time because it's not happening during the apocalypse. No, the
Mm-hmm.
intro was important not just because it's the inception of it, it's because him losing his daughter is what affects this entire relation he has about protecting this girl, about accomplishing the job that he feels he failed once. And that episode, while it's focusing on different characters, is a mirror to the two that we have. It's beautiful, dude. It's beautiful. You also know how I feel about comedic actors doing drama, and he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, Nick Offerman is excellent. And Murray
Yes,
Bartlett
sir.
as well. So nothing taken away from either of them. I think for me, like I liked the story, but I felt like it stayed on one note for the most part. And maybe I just kind of knew where we were going as soon as we got there. Because like
Really, you like
I don't know, it
that
it
ending
kind
was great.
the ending was fine. The ending was fine. Yeah, I feel like you can see the tragic love story thing happening from the moment that they sit down at the piano together. You know.
It's a beautiful flip from what happened in the game. I think it takes all the stubbornness that character had in the game and made it
Hmm.
something very poetic.
Yeah, I didn't dislike it. It just I don't think I had the same like
Hated
really
it.
emotional
That's actually the one
reaction
we
that
saw
most
together.
people did.
We saw a couple together. We
Yeah,
saw 3 together, if I'm not mistaken. We
yeah, way
saw
back
the
in Utah.
finale together. So yeah, we had a good
How
run.
many different states have you watched The Last of Us in now? I think
Not
3
enough,
for
man. I'm trying to actually do their whole tour down Colorado, just watching,
me.
just visit the locations that they're playing
Yeah.
them in.
Any guest stars? You just talked about Nick Offerman. Any guest stars in particular that you loved, or even if it's like the smaller moments? Like I wanted to shout out. Is it Ashley Johnson who gets the role as Ellie's mother in episode 9? And like not just because like the similarities in their look, but like her performance also I thought was excellent there.
It's great.
That was a really cool moment. I think anything that stood out to you?
Every single one where they got people from the video game to come do that part. That
Yeah,
who you mentioned, I know the one who had played Tess, maybe I could be mistaken, from the earlier
yeah,
episodes. She had said that she had done it for the game, the performance capture, and now she was the age of the character, so she applied again. Marlene, thank you. Killed it. Troy Baker coming back, and they're taking the entire episode for me to realize that it's the dude who played Joel was great because he's one of the spiffiest looking dudes. Like you think
Mm-hmm.
video games, and you have probably the most attractive, suave looking man doing the Joker, doing Joel, doing Booker from Bioshock Infinite, some of
Yeah.
my favorite games. So to see him in here, I thought was fantastic. To see Ellie kill Joel, a version of Joe, was great. But no, a lot of video game movies I think have had that respect for their performers. I know for Sonic, they also brought the actor who did Tails for the video game.
Yeah.
They came back to do the voice, and I think there's something in there where they don't have to replicate the exact same characters they were playing, but there's an essence that they bring to the production that there's like a DNA to the video game that remains even if they're doing something
Yeah.
different. All these actors killed it.
Yeah, because like there is sometimes like a group of people who are such big fans of the video game that they try to advocate for those people playing those roles in like the adaptation. And like it's an adaptation, you have to change certain things,
Yeah.
people age and stuff too, but this, it felt like a really organic way
Cause
to both honor and incorporate all those
yeah,
people and make them more like, I think in some of the behind the scenes interviews they were talking about like, I just expected to be a clicker that got killed, and having
yeah,
them be more
and that
than
would have
that
been
is
cool.
really cool.
It's just way better. I like the Veg brought it up. I don't know if you ever got to see the Uncharted movie. This is the
Yeah.
epitome of how not to do a cameo. They did the complete opposite, and I respect that. It wasn't a joke within the universe, mind you, different genres, but it actually fit within it. There was also a nice little Easter egg later on about it being Abby's. Uh, the Abby actor was playing someone in the background at the end
One of
when
the
shoots the
nurses,
surgeon.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think all that world building is really cool. What did you think of Melanie as the bad guy for a little bit that we get for like what 2 episodes? She's starting a lot of stuff. Everyone loves her in Yellow Jackets, but kind of playing like the leader here was trying to get back. She didn't convince me throughout all of it, but there is one speech she gives where like it clicked for me, and I went like, oh. You're like the soccer mom who's in the apocalypse running stuff. And I think it's
Yeah.
because we know her from Yellow Jackets that we could see that kind of sinister side of her in the background. Um, but only having her in 2 episodes, what'd you think?
Well, I kind of liked that we didn't necessarily, especially because Joel and Ellie moved geographically, that it wasn't like one big bad chasing them throughout the countryside. I did like that she wasn't a single episode character. Like I felt, there's like a not bottle episode, but standalone episode quality that
Yeah.
to some of the series that I like when they're not all standalone episodes. Um, she's also like just a really interesting actress. I think she makes really smart choices with her characters, and it's kind of like an unexpected person to embody this. Uh, militaristic leader, right? So I think there's something fun in how unexpected it is to get this kind of like mousy voice commanding this uh strong arm. But
Uh huh.
I don't know, I think that ultimately her character's motivations were a lot simpler I than I would prefer from something that normally has a lot of depth to its story. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's her brother, that's the whole reason for all this. Like I don't know.
You wanted to go deeper.
I wanted it to go deeper. It felt like an underwhelming end when they did finally get rid of her.
It does have that video game aspect to it where it's like final boss stages, okay,
Yes.
and we're done with her. Like they don't linger in the background like you would think a story would go where it's like they're still out there, they might come back. Every single time they hit a checkpoint, they clear everyone out. She's done.
Exactly. Yeah.
They get to the character of David. They're cleared out. They clearly cleared out all the zombies as well by episode 3. So yeah, I can see that part only because it doesn't adapt as well for the show. We had a lot of moments where we're like, oh, my man's gonna craft. Time for him to get a new gun. Time for him to reload stuff here. There's points, when they're like climbing up something and you're like
Boost.
pressing triangle,
Yeah.
looking for the ladder. Man, yeah. I mean that's the beauty, I guess, of when you're seeing both mediums kind of clash together. But nonetheless, I do like a lot of the performances that they were able to bring. I guess
Yeah.
even David, who comes in, I think the penultimate episode, where you're really able to get one of the best performances out of Ellie's character. He did a good contrast in just being this almost sinister leader, someone who doesn't want to be a leader but is willing to carry everybody, sometimes for their own goodwill. But
Yeah.
fantastic.
Let's talk a little bit about season two. We don't want to spoil The Last of Us part two for those of you who aren't people who played the video game, but I
Everyone
think we can
does.
talk about the things we can talk about the things that we're anticipating and excited for. How do you think the show will handle the introduction of some new characters, particularly Abby, since we spend so much time with her in the story for Last of Us Part Two?
I don't know, bro. I'll put it to you this way: what do you think are the biggest three? Well, you said no spoilers, but like the biggest pushback from part two.
Yeah.
What do you think was the stuff they
D-
need
uh,
to?
Do you think we're gonna have a more interesting discussion if we just go full spoilers on part two? Because we can just do that.
We need to go full spoilers in part two because there's no other way to talk about the future. Because even when we were talking about the finale and you were saying, I wonder how they're going to adapt something, we all thought you were talking about one thing when in reality you were talking
Yeah,
about the other thing.
you're
So,
talking about a conversation that we tried to have in Austin around people who haven't played the part two, and
so
and
might as
and
well,
yeah,
yeah,
it
not even have that here. But
almost went
yeah,
south.
there's that idea of just like when coming for part two, there's what I felt was a big pushback from the video game was what we were saying makes it so much better. You are playing. You feel like you're making the
Yeah,
choices. And there was a part in part two where the narrative was set for you. Which part one has that as well. That final decision, which we can mention of Joel. You don't have a
yeah,
choice. You have to choose what they've already chosen for Joel. No one had a problem with that. Because until the show came out, most people defended the choice. We'll get
yeah.
back to that, or I don't know if you want to focus on that before we start
Well,
talking about
no,
part two. But
no, I'm glad you brought that up because that is one thing that I really like that the show was able to pull off is that like they get you to the point where you're rooting for Joel and Ellie so bad that you end up in a way almost as a viewer advocating Joel's killing spree.
yeah, but I felt that because
That's
it
similar
was,
to the video game feeling. Yeah.
but I think that with the TV series, there was more pushback on the decision he made. I found, and it could just be because it's HBO weekly,
Yeah.
that more people came out trying to go like, I don't know, I think what he did was wrong. Whereas when the video game came out, everybody knew what had to
Right.
be done because we had played for 60 hours.
That's the thing too. Like the video game gets you into the mindset of like you have to kill to survive, and you're also because just because it's a video game, like the the unspoken relationship between you, the video game player, and the video game making company is like I get to shoot things, right? So
Yeah,
I feel like
it's the
there's
contract.
the even if like you may not want to do certain things that your video game characters do, I think you implicitly know like I have to do this to get to the end of the game. Whereas with a TV show, there's almost like this different thing where it's like I can argue they should have written this differently, right? Like I don't know. It is interesting to note how much more pushback there was, and maybe like maybe because you didn't get to sit there for 5 minutes with the controller in your hand being like, do I really have to push the trigger right now
You just got
to
to get
move
it done.
forward?
Yeah, especially for me
Yeah,
who took 3 days to beat that ending because I only had like
exactly.
two, like a stick and two
You
bullets.
had more time
Uh,
to come to terms with it
yeah,
in the
so
video
people
game.
are able to discuss it more. How will that affect the complete reversal that is part two? Because part two
Yes.
was the opposite. Maybe 2013,
All
and
right.
yes, 2013 is
We'll
completely different to
mhm.
2019.
And we'll go
But there's a
full spoilers
full
for
spoilers.
The Last of Us Part 2 game from here on out. So if you haven't played the game, you can feel free to check out
Do you recommend it?
the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean,
I
it's
recommend it.
brutal, but you've come this far. Why not get even more bleak?
I say play it. It is a fantastic game, even with its ups and downs. Part one is still my favorite. The remastered is beautiful. Play both games.
Yeah.
Three, two, one. There's a decision you have to make in part two towards the end where a lot of people, even though having played part one, the narrative's already set for you, they did not like where the narrative went. But boy, was a fit thrown about, but I have to do it. Probably the second most complained about scene would have been in
Hmm.
GTA 5 when you play as Trevor and you can't pass I don't know if you know about this. You cannot
Yeah.
pass the scene until you do the torture. I remember that
Yeah.
being a huge problem with a lot of people. They're like, bro, I don't know, it's a little bit over the top. Hey, I can go to strip clubs and slap people and take cars and drugs and all of this. But the torture scene was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm being forced to play this.
Yeah.
The
No,
Last of Us
exactly.
2
And
has an
that's
ending where you're forced to play that. Will the
yeah.
show be different? Will they feel
I
different about
think
it?
well, so the thing that's interesting about The Last of Us ending is that they've given you a reason to root in both characters that are involved in that ending, Abby and Ellie, right? And part of the reason why it feels so conflicted to do what you do, to actually, fight and cause so much pain in that moment, is because you know that it's not going to be the best thing for either of those people, you're now just hurting both of the people you've invested in. I'm curious to see how they handle the integration of Abby, because I think they have to get to a point by that finale where you're as invested in Abby as you are in Ellie. And Ellie's got a full season head start, and I anticipate she's going to have a lot more screen time than whoever they cast as Abby in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they go full 50-50, I don't know.
Which was
But
kind of the video
I,
game.
I
Video
feel
game
like
was a lot more, yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's a I feel like by giving you no real like primary rooting interest, if they can toe that line, if they can walk that tightrope, then culminating in that moment is going to feel awful, like like the worst version of the ending of Warrior or something like that.
Yeah, which is the purpose of it, right? It's
Yeah,
not supposed to be this, I don't know, positively cathartic moment. It's supposed to be bittersweet, almost like you said. Thematically, there's a purpose for it, and I
yeah,
just wonder the
right,
same way that we're able to sit down with the ending of season one and go like, interesting. Did he do what he did? Was it kind of bad?
yeah.
Now with part two, instead of complaining, will the show be a better medium for people to actually sit down and go, oh, okay, I'm not being forced to make this decision. I actually kind of see what the themes are here. Could
Hmm.
it be more effective? Or will no
I'm
one tune in because of the big incident, which we didn't
That's the
realize?
thing.
And I got
I'm
someone who
surprised.
hasn't played the game, so I'm still keeping it cryptic here. But I think both of you have played it. Talk about, because
Yeah,
look, we got one right here in
I'm
the
sup-
chat.
I'm yeah. I'm surprised that this isn't where you started with, because this is the thing that I cannot wait to see how
I
this just
forgot.
like affects the public at large. Like, you can't go on TikTok now without seeing some kind of Pedro Pascal meme.
Yes.
He's the internet's favorite person. I was thinking about this the other day, right? Because everybody talks about the Red Wedding as like the big moment in Game of Thrones, but not a lot of people were watching Game of Thrones in season 2.
Damn, bro.
That more people were
You got your
watching
memes
at that
ready?
moment with Pedro Pascal. And what's going to happen when he gets involved in another untimely, horrific death? I mean, the public at large is going to be traumatized. How early in the season they going to do it? Because this is the inciting incident of the game, right? Are they going to drop this at the end of episode 1? Do we have
Yes.
60 minutes of Pedro
Yes.
Pascal as Joel left?
Yes. I hope it's more brutal than the other one that we start making compilations of him.
That's just going to be Pedro Pascal's thing now, to die
Yeah.
brutally on
Mandalorian
prestige
needs to end
HBO
that way too.
shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes. That would be
yeah.
awesome.
I mean,
Think
like,
about it. It has to happen.
I mean, look, it has to
And it should be the
happen
ending of part one. The same way
if
that,
they're
that
adapt.
the first one ends with the daughter dying.
Mhm.
It has to be. It has to
Yeah,
be.
it's just so interesting given the reaction to Pedro Pascal. I just can't imagine it. People
That's
are going to be.
beautiful though.
How are they going to do that? Are they going to not let? Are they going to fill the ads with Pedro Pascal, and people are going to feel cheated or something? Like, I
Yeah, what's the
cannot
problem?
wait for the people who
That's
don't
beautiful.
know to find out.
That's going to be great. I think it's what's going to cause a huge uproar. My worry is that after a
Yeah,
couple of episodes, will people still be tuning in, or will it drop off? May I? May I
that's a good question. Sure.
say it? You already know who we're talking about. What's the other zombie show?
Oh,
Right?
you think this is their Steven Yeun moment?
How could it not be? And that may be the biggest worry that HBO has on their hands. because everybody knows if you look at the charts, it is the like
Yeah,
craziest drop that has ever
right.
happened after the Negan
Because
episode.
it's
That is a Negan moment.
because
Negan's
like
likable.
even
Negan's got a
yeah,
spinoff. Abby, I don't think, is getting a spinoff. So it is a little worrisome. But they need to commit.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like they've been very faithful to the games to this point, so I don't see a reason why they wouldn't going forward. That being said, killing Joel in the game was extremely controversial. Fans really did not like that. That's I don't think that's anything compared to killing Pedro Pascal. There's a difference between killing Joel and killing Pedro
Because it's a
Pascal.
double, yeah. There's
Yeah,
a off-screen persona and the on-screen persona, yeah. I
yeah,
don't know. I think it's integral to part two. They need to keep it.
yeah.
But Devesh also makes a
I
great
agree.
point.
I
You know,
agree.
there's different ways to be able to go about it and still be able to pitch it for the whole season in ads because you have a bunch of cutaways.
True. Yeah, and maybe they just need like an extra amount of flashbacks and stuff. It's just gonna be
I just think
interesting
that's
if
cool.
that's really what kicks everything off. Like,
That's
and they
awesome.
don't hold it as for a mid-season finale or something. I think that's what they have to do. It's just uh, it'll. I feel like it'll be the Red Wedding times 10, and I don't like to speak hyperbolically, but I feel like it earned that. You know.
I think HBO is looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe they're not looking forward to what comes after it, but that first episode, woof, it's gonna be a lot.
Between
Anything
that
else?
and the Sam show, it's just gonna be nuts.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up this Last of Us discussion?
Again, if you have not played the video games, do yourself a favor because it's one of those where even though you know the story, that just the gameplay. I think we're downplaying how it revolutionized the ability to be in a cutscene and come out of the cutscene to the action,
Hmm.
to be in the middle of running and then end up in a place
Those
so
doors, man.
seamlessly. And that's why the second one's so good because I don't know what machine they had going on for this, but it just works beautifully. The engine that they have to go in and out of the gameplay. I also think that there's a lot of Easter eggs within the game that you don't find in the show. One of the best parts
Hmm.
when you're playing the video game is seeing letters scattered to different houses. And if you take the time to invest yourself in the video game, it rewards you back. You follow along people who loved ones who have left stuff behind for them and how those stories end. So there's just so much more at play there that I think it's worth watching and playing both. But yeah, I'm excited to see where they take it. I do want to see more
Same.
clickers in the second one. Get that budget up. Okay, that'd be great to see. Other than that, I'm happy. I'm happy with it.
Yep.
I'm not gonna lie. I had my hopes a little iffy when they were going to adapt it into a video game because it just didn't make sense to me. I thought The Last of Us revolutionized what video games were. Naughty Dog did this with Uncharted, and they did it with The Last of Us. They
Hmm.
watched blockbusters and said, "How can we make those better?" So if they made them better, yes, it always felt weird that they were going back. And you and
Right.
we make our living. It's our first love, TV and movies. But there is something about that medium of video games that did elevate it to the next level.
Absolutely. Devesh in the live stream says that game two will be multiple seasons. I don't think HBO has confirmed that yet, but I would not be surprised if they decide to stretch out The Last of Us into a couple seasons, at least
Yeah, just make it 10
two.
episodes.
But
Just make
if
it
they
10.
do end up splitting season two or game two into 2 and 3 seasons, what do you think would be a good cutoff point for the end of season two? Because the one that occurred to me is there's a moment in the movie theater when the characters come back together. Like you see it from two different perspectives, right? And that would probably be a really cool point to end a season in, just because like you can't wait that long to do the Joel thing.
Yeah, you can. You wait till mid-season to do the golf club, and I guarantee you'll have a season 6 Walking Dead
I thought you wanted it to be
viewership.
episode
I
one.
I do, but no one told me they were pitching 2 seasons. I don't think they're pitching 2 seasons, but if they're pitching 2 seasons, then that changes it. I
Devesh
like
Mason confirmed it, so
who?
Craig Mason confirmed it according to Vesh. So
Oh, all right then.
maybe,
Then I'm gonna
maybe.
stick with the golf club. I like Devesh's previous question a little bit better. How are we feeling about other adaptations, namely Tsushima, God of War? And then I think he had also asked another one that we may be looking forward to. I have a pick, but how do you feel about those two first?
Um, I kind of feel like God of War makes much more sense as a video game. Like, I don't, unless they're gonna go to like crazy lengths to make the CGI really great, I feel like it's just gonna feel like a weird mix of live action and CGI
World of
on a
Warcraft.
big screen. Exactly, right?
I feel
And
like
just
that
like
was
not the
Tsushima.
same magic.
Yeah.
You feel like that
Look,
was
yeah,
Tsushima?
because Last of Us took out the zombies to the point that we're going, man, there wasn't even that many zombies for the narrative that they had. Yet we
Hmm.
still really like the show because there's so much in the Last of Us narrative that they were missing stuff that was story. Tsushima, no offense to the acquaintances you make along the way, but I play that game to get on the horse. I play that game to
Yeah,
do ghost mode, and all of that is gone. I feel like it's going to be the new Assassin's Creed if they do
yeah.
Tsushima wrong.
Tsushima also feels like too much in deference to the great samurai films that came before it, right? Like, I'd
Dude, make
rather
me
just
another
watch.
original.
Yeah, I'd rather just watch Japanese cinema than watch an
It's going to have
American
to
who
be that.
watched a lot of Japanese cinema try to
Yeah,
make that a movie.
the best case scenario is using the IP to make an original story. Sadly,
Absolutely.
but I'm gonna give you the best one. LA Noir. Yo, we need this as a movie. First of all, we need
Is
this
Doubt gonna
remastered.
come up on the screen too?
No, bro. Imagine like the people rewatching it and whatever video essays being done about like, no, they got this one wrong. Here's my 10 reasons why I think he was lying. Doubt, doubt, doubt. Yes, yes, yes. I would love
I'd
that
love
one.
that. Honestly, I'd love that. I just need another LA Noir game first.
I just give me a remaster. Give me the same game,
Yeah,
but for the PS5.
yeah,
What's going
yeah.
on? Yeah, that game's still
All right.
expensive. You can't even
Yeah,
get it for cheap.
it's worth it. It's still worth it.
It's really worth it.
All right, so that's about all for this podcast. You can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at ZShevich. That's ZShevich. And check out my YouTube or TikTok channels at Multiplex Show. Art, where can people find more from you?
You can find me over at Let Me Explain on Letterboxd, on Twitter, on YouTube, or every week here on the Intercut Podcast.
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I like Overcast. And then make sure you're subscribed not just to the audio podcast, but to the video feed as well on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/IntercutPod, where you can watch our bright smiling faces as we run through the latest in entertainment, find new episodes of our weekend must watch every Monday. And please leave us a comment, like the videos, consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. Shout out to all of you that do. Like our Facebook, like our Instagram, follow us on Twitter, support our Patreon. You can find all of them at Intercut Pod to get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, from all the guests that we feature here on Intercut. Thanks again, and until next time, it wasn't time that did it.